All right, and it looks like we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, everyone, regardless of where you're coming to us from. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a very special guest here. We have Les Kletke. He is a published author, book coach, ghostwriter, and professional speaker. And today's topic is how to write a book. We're going to come up with a subtitle very shortly. It could be How to Write a Book in 30 Days or 7 Reasons Why You Should Write a Book. There are lots of information in here. I almost feel like we're writing several books during this session. But really, there's so much valuable information that I'm really glad that you're here to share with us. So we're not going to spend too much time here at the very beginning because I know that you're all here to listen to Les and to get some insights from him, and we certainly have a lot of material here prepared for you, so we're really excited to share it. Now, to start and kick things off, we got part 1 here. It was all about why you should write a book. And it starts off with the 7 reasons why you should write a book. And unless the first thing that you have written here is the first reason why you should write a book is called the love of writing. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there's as many reasons to write a book as there are individuals, and research says that 80% of people want to write a book. They talk about writing a book. So it's not unusual for people to want to write a book. What is unusual is to actually achieve it. And that means sitting down and actually doing it. That's the only secret to writing a book, and you don't have to have any other reason than your love of writing. And I believe that that's a part of human nature for most people. Now, probably not everyone, but a lot of people just enjoy the act of writing. In fact, there's a word for it. Scribindi is nothing else than our love of writing. So we shouldn't feel that we have to have experienced a major event or a turning point in our life. It's just about sitting down and recording the events of our life or what is important to us and enjoying the activity. I liken writing a book to a journey. The journey is as important, and in many times more important or more fun than the destination. So we should enjoy the act of writing the book just as much as we enjoy traveling or getting to someplace. It's not over when we have our book launch or when we actually have our book printed, just as that's not the beginning. It's just one stage. So if you want to write a book, take the time, sit down and start.
One of the things you had here that I thought was really interesting is my farmers of the world as a little cue to us. Can you just give us a little bit more about why you have that included?
Well, my Farmers of the World book is exactly that. There is no economic reason or no justification for it. I just want to write a book about the countries that I've visited and the farmers that I've met in those countries. I make it a point because I've worked as an agricultural journalist and my background is an ag economist. So I make it a point of going to visit farmers or the marketplaces of countries that I go to. My tagline is that if you eat, you're involved in agriculture. So everybody understands that food has to be produced and food has to be marketed. I visit that in the countries that I go to. So I have been saving stories, writing stories, collecting pictures of the 33 countries that I've been to, and I have a typical story from each one. That's what I'm going to include in my Farmers of the World book, and it's kind of a bucket list thing for me. I've been working on it, and it's in draft, and I'm getting close to the point that I could publish it, and some chapters will be added if I go to more countries. But at this point, it would be my stories of farmers from 33 different countries, and the interaction that I had. When I visited Scotland, I found out that the Clydesdales are in fact on the endangered species list in Scotland, the home of the breed. So And that's just because at one time a number of all the best studs were sold into America and ended up in breeding farms and fancy hitches. So the horse became rare. The Clydesdale horse became rare in Scotland. It's an endangered species. My story about Scotland will be about visiting one of those farmers who is restoring the breed. It's not the kind of thing that'll change the world. It's just an interesting fact that when I present someone with that book, they'll go, ah, I didn't know that. And that's my whole intent of Farmers of the World. Farmers of the World will not be for sale. It's going to be a limited edition book. There will be 100 printed, and they will be special gifts for special people that visit my home or that I have interaction with, and I hope that they appreciate that it's a limited run and it's something that I've written for a few friends. So it's about my love of writing and telling a few of the personal tales, and there's nothing wrong with that. When we do a book, some people feel that, well, you could take it commercially, and probably I would sell a few copies, or I might sell some at speaking engagements, but that is not the intent of Farmers of the World. Farmers of the World is my stories about those countries, and in fact, I commissioned an oil painting for the front cover. It's of an old grain elevator that used to be across the section from the Kletke homestead. So that's in tribute to my grandfather, whose land that originally was, and my father, who farmed that place. So we have an oil painting at the beginning, and yes, the artist thought it was a little strange that there was only going to be 100 of those books ever printed, but she did take the time to, what I think, create a great oil painting for the front of Farmers of the World.
Wow, that sounds like a really impactful story.
Right. You could order one, but not going to be for sale. Perhaps if you do something special, Kevin, you might get one.
Well, I think we're getting close to that today. Moving along here in part one in why you should write a book, and continuing the line here, 7 reasons why you should write a book, is part two, question number 2, or reason number 2, and that is economic. What can you tell us about that, Les?
Well, the economic reason for writing a book is totally different than what we talked about in reason 1 with just the love of writing. Now, that doesn't mean that it's at odds with each other. They do fit together, and I don't think that any one of the reasons that we're going to discuss in the next couple of sections is separate or has to be different than or at odds with another one. They all fit together, and we have some blend of these reasons in us as authors. We do it for our love of writing. We do it for our economic reasons as well. And as a book coach, as a ghostwriter, I maintain that there has to be some economic returns, or otherwise you're not going to be in business long if writing a book and publishing a book doesn't make business sense for you. So in my role as a speaker, and that's primarily where I use my books, I find that there are 3 opportunities to sell books or to gain recognition from books. As a speaker, before an event, I say that a book is a business card on steroids. When was the last time that someone asked you to autograph your business card, or cherished it the way they cherish a book? When I give someone a signed book, I find they stay on their desk or in their bookshelf for a lot longer than a business card. And the production cost of a book today is not much more than a good quality brochure or a folder that we used to hand out, and we all know how long those stay on shoppers' desks. So writing a book is a business card on steroids. It gives you an opportunity to introduce yourself, and it gives you something to send someone when they ask about doing business with you. And that holds true for a professional speaker or a consultant or anyone else in the service industry. You can send them a book which expands on anything that you might say in a sales pitch. It gives them the idea, and it also gives you credibility. That's one thing that a book does. It gives you instant credibility as a published author. So that's how I use a book before a speaking engagement, during the speaking engagement, and everyone immediately thinks of sales at the back of the room. And I believe in just the opposite. I do not want to sell books at the back of the room at a speaking engagement. I believe strongly that that cheapens me as a speaker, and it cheapens the event. They're not going to a trade show or a flea market where there's a sales table at the back of the room. When I get hired as a speaker, I sign the contract, and we come up with the price that they're going to pay me for my speaking. When that is completed, I then say, and how would you like to buy books for everyone in the audience? It's a totally separate contract, and I offer them a real discount if they buy books for everyone. I usually give them a discount to about half the price. I offer to work with a sponsor if they want someone to sponsor the books, and they might want to put a business card in it. So in fact, a sponsor at an event can give away what appears to be a $20 book for what really cost them about $10 to include in the package at the convention. Then at the event itself, I'm just personalizing those books. I offer to be there, and I'll stay as long as the organizers want me, and sign those books so that I'm personalizing them to the people in the audience. That gives them the feeling of getting to know me. It also gives me the opportunity, and it's a great sales tool because they're telling me about another audience that should hear the message that I've just shared with them. So that's where I generate a lot of sales leads. In the beginning of my speaking, I always felt that if I didn't get three opportunities for the next speaking engagement, I hadn't really engaged my audience. So that's just one of the ways of looking at it. But when you're there signing books and personalizing it, it's a totally different attitude. It's a totally different interaction than when you're trying to sell.
Tell me about, sorry to interrupt, but I'd be really curious to hear about a story about your first book, how that impacted you in terms of economics.
Well, my first book was a collection of travel stories about places that I've been, and I was very fortunate in 1995 to win something called the Nuffield Scholarship, which allowed me to study agriculture in England and continental Europe for 5 months. When I came home, I was on the speaking circuit talking about what I had seen, and you got to remember, this is before the internet was as popular as it is now, so the speaking in speaking engagements were much more common at meetings and telling the stories about agriculture in Europe. So that was very popular, and people started asking if I had a book. And at the time, I didn't have a book. I had written newspaper copy during my travels. So my first book started out by being photocopies of the 100 or so newspaper articles that I had written during my travels, and I put a hard cover on it, or a stiffer cover on it, and called it Notes from a Nuffield Scholar, which wasn't really original, but it sold well enough that it encouraged me and got me going down the road of actually publishing and self-publishing a real book, which was a collection of 40 stories of my travels. And when I released that book, I tripled my speaking fees. Now at that time I was charging $500, but I went to $1,500, which was a huge increase, and I got more speaking engagements because now I had a book and I was a published author, as well as the books that I sold at the event. And that was before I had figured out that I'd be better off to sell to everyone. So at that time, My thought was if I did a really good job on the presentation, I could sell to 1/3 of the audience.
And now, that was 20 years ago, literally this year, and the internet has obviously changed everything dramatically. Is there any difference now, do you find, when people do the book, like in terms of economic reason, any difference now in terms of a speaker or author, coach, or just a, a professional releasing a book now versus 20 years ago? Any differences? How does it change?
Huge difference. Huge difference is that it is more of an impact. If you're going from a non-published speaker, and you can be a great storyteller and doing a good job on the speaking circuit, but having a book will increase your fees by more than $1,000. There's no doubt in my mind. And I say, I went from $500 to $1,500 when I had a book. That kind of increase, if anything, it would be more today, and the recognition is certainly as much. But perhaps one of the changes is just in getting the booking. It's expected that you have a book. If you don't have a book, you can be a $500 speaker, but you're not going to have very many jobs. I have a friend who hosts a radio show, and she says that's her first filter of guests, and she has to find a guest a week for this show. And if you don't have a book, if you haven't published a book, it's unlikely that you're going to be a guest on her show.
Excellent. Well, let's keep moving along here, because continuing.
Well, the third thing on the speaking side of it is using your book after the engagement.
Okay, please tell us about that. Yeah.
And for that, I make a point of getting a book to the person that hired me afterwards. I send them a hardcover book, and I now print all of my books in soft cover for the commercial sales. And I have a fellow who works at doing the hardcover books by hand, and he does those for me for about $25. And they're full color hardcover, and they've got a ribbon in it for a bookmark. So I make a point of sending that to whoever hired me, and I find that those stay on the desk or on the bookshelf even longer. And when somebody phones her and asks her who's a good speaker, well, there's your business card on steroids right there. And I always include a personal inscription. Usually it says something to the effect of, I know that you were busy during the event and didn't have time to hear my presentation. Thank you for hiring me. Enjoy the message.
Excellent. Well, that certainly is a very valuable message indeed. Continuing on with part 1, why you should write a book, and the 7 reasons why you should write a book, is reason number 3. And Les, you have here written recognition. Now, please tell us much more about that.
Well, recognition, and I touched on it in one of the earlier sessions, writing a book does bring you recognition. But one of the reasons that you can choose to write a book is recognition. Recognition for someone who has helped you, someone who has impacted you, someone who is very important in your life. One of the clients, and one of my favorite clients, wrote a book about her mom and the struggles that her mother went through, losing her, my client's father, this lady's husband, to stomach cancer, having their house burned down on Christmas Day, all of those things. And this lady wrote a book about her mother and what she went through and what a tremendous influence she had been in this lady's life. It wasn't to bring recognition to the author herself. It was to bring recognition to this mother as an individual, and to mothers in general, and the things that they do, the sacrifices they make, the choices they make as they go through life. So a book is a great way to recognize those people that have influenced us, those people that have made sacrifices for us. And one of the things about this book, we hurried it a little bit so that it would be released just before Mother's Day, and found that there was a tremendous demand for it as a gift for Mother's Day. It gave people the opportunity to say thanks to their mom in the words of someone else. And sometimes we're not really good at communicating it with those that are closest to us. And buying a book like this and having the pages in it to write your own story, to tell the story of what was important to you, made this book really special. And it allowed people to add to the book and create their own story. So yes, it recorded the stories of this lady on a Saskatchewan farm, but it also gave people the opportunity to create a family heirloom in their family.
Well, that certainly is an amazing story. Very heart-touching.
The amazing story was what this lady went through, and losing her husband to stomach cancer and a fire and another marriage and readjusting to a blended family. That was an amazing story.
Certainly an amazing experience for you, having gone through the process of coaching her. Moving right along, we're still in part 1, why you should write a book, and the 7 reasons why you should write a book. Reason number 4 is legacy. Now, this must be a really important one for a lot of book writers, so please share your experiences.
Leaving a legacy, and many times we wonder what we will leave for our children, and we make such an effort to have a bank account or to take them on one last trip to Disney and all of those kind of things. But I have found in working with a number of clients that it's about leaving a legacy for their children, explaining the things that impacted you and that made you the way you were. Not just recording the historical dates of, Grandpa came to Canada in 1912 and this happened and that happened. Sure, that's great. But those kind of things are available in history books or on the internet or in libraries. Leaving a legacy is about writing your story and telling the impact that events had on you and shaped you. Leaving a legacy in a book is about explaining why you were the way that you were, and having children understand that years later. My best example of that is a lady that I'm working with who is a survivor of residential schools in Northern Ontario. And she acknowledges that she was a less than perfect mother. In retrospect, she says that, but she's writing her book to explain the experiences that she went through in residential school, how that impacted her, and why she wasn't able to hug her children after the age of 8. She was taken away at 7 years old and didn't see her parents again. So she never had that relationship with her mother or father. And she says now, looking back at it, she was a great mother until kids got to that 7, 8-year-old age, and she didn't know how to handle it. She didn't know how to talk to them or to hug them, and that's what she's including in her book. She's telling the story of residential schools, which I think she'll be commercially successful in just telling these stories. But for her, a bigger reason is leaving the legacy and explaining the impact of those events to her children, but most importantly, explaining why she was the way she was. And maybe that's the true definition of a legacy.
Legacy can be applied obviously to many different situations. I know that you're working on launching another book that involves not just one author, but many authors over a multi-state area. I mean, this is a different kind of legacy. Can you tell us a little bit more about that to give our listeners some more insight?
Absolutely different, different legacy entirely. I've worked on a book with 29 influencers of the grain industry from North Dakota, Minnesota, and Montana, and telling their signature story of their life, of the impact that they had on the grain trade. So yes, it's a legacy for their children. It's a legacy for the people of North Dakota, Minnesota. They're using that book as a fundraiser for FFA, the Future Farmers of America, and it also records the individual stories. So with that particular book, and I've talked about it earlier, that I have a fellow that works on that hand makes hardcover books. So what we've done is we've included in the package, each one of our contributors gets 3 hardcover books to share with special people, and then there's the typical soft cover black and white book that is available commercially, but it's got the stories of people who went on to be the Secretary of Agriculture in the United States, which, according to their ranking, is the seventh most influential person in the United States cabinet, and we got a letter from President Jimmy Carter of commendation for Bob Berglund, which is included in the front of the book. So, yeah, that's a different kind of legacy when you get letters from the President of the United States talking about the people included in the book, and when they're telling their story at 75 or 80 years old. Bob Berglund, who was the Secretary of Agriculture, he didn't even ask to see the copy when we kind of completed the interview. He said, "No, write it the way you understood it. At this age, I don't have to answer to anyone. I can tell the truth, and the story is the way the story is." So it was a joy to work with someone who doesn't have to have his words checked by a PR department or someone else. Bob Berglund told the story of being the Secretary of the United States, the Secretary of Agriculture of the United States of America, in his own words, and we conducted the interview at his kitchen table. So that book's going to be a legacy for a lot of different people in a very different way.
I think it'd be very powerful too. So, and in both of these stories, obviously very powerful in different ways, but legacies. Continuing on with part 1, why you should read a book, and the 7 reasons why you should read a book, is reason number 4. And that we have is standing on the shoulders, that you called it. So I have maybe a little bit of an idea of what you meant here, but I'm curious to hear more about what you had in mind.
Well, and the classic line is from the astronomer: "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." And that's something that we can use when we're writing a book. If we can help someone, if we can allow someone to move further ahead faster, then we should be obligated to write a book and give them that head start. So that they can advance their career, they can make proper decisions earlier, quicker, and move ahead. I'm working with a fellow in Ontario, and I've checked. Bill doesn't mind me using his name. Bill Smalley has written a book about consultative selling, and it changes the dynamics of the sales process. It talks about forming partnerships and building trust with your clients. So Bill wants to get that in the hands of young people who are starting out in a sales career and can approach it entirely differently and move ahead more quickly. It's not a matter of the sales approach of the 1970s where somebody makes a call and writes a few orders. He talks about understanding your clients and actually being the research department for your corporation, seeing what your clients' problems are, taking them back to the R&D department and having the research people work on solving those problems so that the next time you call on a client, you have something happy to tell them, something good to give them that will help them. You're not just there to take an order.
You know, in fact, even the process that we're going right now in terms of how to write a book, are we not giving that same information to people? I mean, people will not be able to stand on perhaps your shoulders to learn from your experience and insights and getting their message out to the world?
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that a book coach does, or that I view as the role of a book coach, is being able to help someone. I'd like to share my process with you so you don't have to go down the same road. And I don't believe that I'm smarter than anyone else, or that anyone else can't discover this process. But for heaven's sakes, why do you have to do it on your own when someone will help you with it, and you can get down to writing the book instead of developing a process? And in a lot of cases, you're going to write one, perhaps two books. So why reinvent the wheel just for that one book that you're going to write? Have someone help you, have someone give you the process and help you along the way by asking the right questions. A book coach or a ghostwriter does not change your ideas. I believe that my role as a ghostwriter or a book coach is to help you find the ideas, the solutions that you already have inside. And if I do have an ability, it's to ask questions. I'm not making up new ideas for you. I'm finding out what you already know.
All right, excellent. Let's continue on. We're still in part one, why you should write a book, and in fact, the 7 reasons why you should write a book. Reason number 6 is cathartic. So I can imagine you've been in people's lives. They've opened up to you in ways that they perhaps even haven't opened up to their spouses, to their immediate family, their own children. You have probably more insight into this than most people that at least I know. What can you share with us on this?
Absolutely. There's a number of people that I have worked with that write a book for purely cathartic reasons. And I don't have a background in counseling. My background is in agricultural economics, but I have an ability to conduct an interview, to ask questions, and to find out, to drill down to the base of the story. And that's what we do when we're writing a book. So I've worked with people. I worked with one person in the last year who she said it was time to write her book, and she had been sexually abused as a 10-year-old. She had been abused by her brother, and now she was 80 years old, and it was time to write that story. So you can imagine that sitting down with her, especially in the first couple of sessions when she didn't really know me, it was difficult for her to open up. But we built that relationship. She told her story. She told about the journey that she had gone on. And what I found really strange, and I say I don't have a background in counseling. This was brand new. She told me that the victim in a situation like that often feels guilty, and that she felt guilty, and it was a matter of overcoming this. That's why she wanted to write the book for other people who might have experienced a similar situation, having those feelings, and to realize that that's the way victims feel, and to go on from there. And as I asked her about it, and I said, what was the turning point? When were you able to forgive? And her line, which I think could have been the title of the book. It's not, but she said that forgiveness is a journey, not an event. And that was, to me, that was a real learning moment for me. To me, that's something that made the entire process worthwhile. And I think for someone who's reading the book and who might pick that up, that's a real lesson, a very important lesson. And so many things are a journey, not a single event. So that's how she healed. That's what came about. and another lady that's writing a book for a somewhat cathartic reason is the survivor of the residential schools. She says that she needs to talk about it. She needs to tell her story, and in fact, she's hoping that it gets picked up and that becomes a way for the entire First Nations community to move towards healing by starting to talk about, and first of all, acknowledging the horrible things that did happen in those schools, talking about it, and then moving on to building a relationship with other members of society. But it's got to start someplace, and for her, it's starting with her writing the stories about what happened to her in residential school.
And I understand that process is still continuing on. So, in fact, all the lessons to be learned from that and the eventual outcome and impact have yet to be seen, really.
Well, we're very early, we as society are very early in the healing part of that process. There's a lot of work to be done. And one thing that is so interesting working with her is that she believes in the value of the traditional native ways of healing, but she doesn't want to share too much about that because she doesn't want the sweat lodge and shaking tent ceremonies to be turned into a tourist attraction and people to come and see how it's done. And she's also very careful about the more normal, or what we could consider the modern methods of healing. And she's also, and you know, she's got several university degrees, well educated, and she doesn't want it to become another industry of social workers coming to help the poor Indians, and that becomes a cash cow for social workers for the next decade or two. So she's very aware of both situations, and in working with her, I have gained a tremendous amount of respect for her attitude in walking the fine line between those two methods of healing.
Well, it's amazing, as you mentioned, someone who's so well educated still going to the process of writing the book for a healing process, given all the methods that are available to her. Amazing story, and I think we're all looking forward to hearing more about that. Continuing on, we're still in part one, which is why you should write a book, and the 7 reasons why you should write a book. The 7th and last reason here, and I'm not sure if it's the most important, you left the best for last, or just it was the order in which you saw them as just coming out in natural progression, but this one is the reinvention. It's the transitioning your career, or something that you've wanted, a turning point. I mean, this has got to be important for probably a lot of either your clients, people watching this right now, even as we speak. Tell me about the impact this has in reinvention.
Well, you know, the rules from business school now tell you that you have to reinvent yourself every 5 years in terms of your skills and where you are in your career and those kind of things. You should always be looking at the change that's coming along. But for some people, that change happens much more quickly or much more suddenly. I worked with a client. Adam Creek is his name, and he was an Olympic rower, and he wrote his book about rowing and the process, because he said that after winning the gold medal, your life changes. And he had spent 8 years focusing on this. It was the Canadian team that was expected to win gold 4 years earlier, and they won silver, and then they all retired from rowing, and 2 years later they said that, you know, they deserved, or they owed it to themselves to get back together, and they called it unfinished business, and went reunited, and they did win the gold medal in the eights in Beijing. But he said that 3 hours after that, you're done. you've won the gold medal, but you have to reinvent yourself as someone else. And you've been used to knowing what you're going to have for breakfast, know when you're going to practice, know when you're going to rest, know when you're going to practice in the afternoon. And now life was totally different. So he wrote his book to come to grips with that. And I don't think that Adam Creek is unique in that. I think that he's a great athlete in that he could acknowledge that and realize that it was time to move on. He recorded that part of his life, and now he's going on to do other work. And we don't have to be a famous athlete or a famous politician to make those kind of changes. We all have monumental changes in our life or a defining moment. Well, maybe it's time to write a book about that, come to grips with it, explain it, and move on. So that's just one of the ideas. I'm working with a lady right now from Saskatchewan, who her book is about having an affair, and that's the working title on it. Is Are You Having an Affair? And it's not about having an affair. She had a marriage breakup because of her husband having an affair, and she's telling that story and how she healed, and she's got to get it out there, and it's a part of her healing process, and she's moving on. So we all have moments like that. Sometimes we're not ready to record them or put them out there, but as we said in an earlier session, sometimes writing a book is just for yourself.
Now, I can imagine a lot of people watching this, or even just your clients. When I think of reinvention and career, I can also think of the different life stages. So, for example, imagine you've had a career your entire life, and then you become an empty nester, or you're getting close to that stage, or the children becoming more self-sufficient, certainly in this day and age. Do you find that sometimes people come either like the husband or the wife, they become at a point where they're using this process to reinvent themselves? Or I also find that we have a huge population now that's going to be turning to retirement, the baby boomers. Are they able to use this process as well to kind of reinvent themselves after a 40 or 50-year career in their profession or business?
Short answer is yes. I can give you examples in every one of those categories. And the empty nesters or those people, and I hate to put an age on them or a name on them, because the end of the baby boomer time frame is exactly where I am. So maybe that's why I relate so well to these people. But if you look at the demographics of who are the fastest age group of horse owners in this country, it's females in that demographic. Who are the largest, or who is the largest age group of new figure skaters in the country? It's the females in that age group. They now have the time and the money to do the things that they didn't have an opportunity to do when they were growing up. So they can now get a horse and afford to have it stabled, or they can take figure skating lessons and do the things that they couldn't, or that their parents couldn't offer them when they were little girls. So we have more leisure time. We have some income that we can spend on those kind of things. So certainly there's people in that age group that are writing books and to record their stories. Probably that is the largest single age group or demographic of my clients is people who now have more time, have a little bit of disposable income. Certainly they want to make the book commercially viable, but their life doesn't depend on it. So they have the time to enjoy the process. And it helps them in so many ways. For one thing, it allows them to reminisce, to think of the good things in their life, to record things for their children or their grandchildren. and to share a few laughs with a friend. I have a number of people who every once in a while they'll say, well, can I get my friend to write a chapter? Well, certainly. Let's call your friend, or I'll interview them and have them write a chapter in your book. What a great way to bring about that interaction, and it makes for a really, really good book launch when the two of you can be there and have common friends and share a few stories.
Certainly a big turning point in a lot of people's lives coming forward. We are now transitioning to part 2, which is all about mindset. And you wanted to start by getting started. And the first question that you have here in our notes is, how do I find time to write? This must be a challenge for probably every one of your clients. I can't imagine someone not having this challenge. But in any case, how do you find time to write less?
You're absolutely right, Kevin. I have not had any client come to me and say, I got too much time. Can you fill it with some writing exercises? Can you give me something to do? Not one, and I've worked with probably close to 60 people. Probably 58 of them have said, how do I find time? How do you find time? Well, it happens when you decide that this is important, and it moves up your priority list. When you decide that writing a book or just sitting down to write is important enough, then something will drop off, or you'll find an extra hour in the day. I have a client in Toronto who he just gets up an hour earlier, and we do the coaching sessions in the morning. When he started with me, I said that, yeah, I'm a morning person, and if you want to write your book, we can just do it before you go to the gym in the morning. He said, great. And so that hour is at 5:30. We do a coaching session from 5:30 to 6 in the morning. That's where he has found time. Other people have given up some television and been amazed at the extra time that gives them. But when you decide that this is important and you make time for it every day, it becomes a habit. You sit down and write, you enjoy it, and if you miss it for a day, you really feel that something is missing. It's just like going to the gym. When you miss it 2 or 3 days, well, then it's easy to drop off. And writing is the same way. You have to decide that this is important to you, it's something that you want to do, and then the time magically appears.
Now, I can imagine there's some other traditional ways of commitment in terms of your time. Have you found, obviously, I mean, having a coach or an accountability partner, has that been instrumental with some people, getting them committed to the process?
I hate to acknowledge how important that is. I'd like to say that, it's my questions and the interaction that we have that make me really valuable as a coach. But a big part of what I do as a coach is provide a deadline. And people say, you know what, I knew that I had an interview coming, on Thursday, so it was just easier to sit down and write it than find an excuse for not having it written. So certainly, having a book coach or someone that will help you with each chapter is valuable. But just having an accountability partner is just as successful. If you have someone that knows that you're writing, and to me, that's the biggest motivation, is tell people that you're writing a book. Because now, when people know that you're writing a book, they're going to ask you, how's that book going? How's it coming? When am I going to see a copy? Can I see a manuscript? And that forces you to write. If you only tell yourself that you're going to write a book, well, then nobody asks you about it. And it's easy to put it on the back burner. I'm going to start in January. I'm going to start in April. Oh, I'm too busy through the summer. When the kids go back to school in fall, I'll start. Well, you can do that to yourself. Tell your friends or post it on Facebook that I'm writing a book and here's the release date. Well, then you get questions and you get encouragement from your friends to get working on that book.
That's certainly what I would call moving away from values. In other words, you're moving away from the pressure and the embarrassment. What about moving towards motivational factors? Do people ever get excited by like the message, what they're doing, thinking about the people they can help? Does any of that play into this?
That's further in the process. Early in the process, it feeds on itself. When you've got 2 or 3 chapters done, that's when I really notice it in clients. When they have 2 or 3 chapters that they're proud of, that they're willing to share with someone else, and then they say, "Whoa!" Then they're going to start asking for more. I got to be a little careful with that, you know. And but when they see that they can write a chapter a day and they can get this done, it builds on itself, and it certainly becomes more fun. It becomes a habit of sitting down to write every day, and like I said in an earlier session, it becomes a habit, and if you don't do it, you feel that something is missing from your day. So that's what I encourage people to sit down and do some writing every single day. Try to make it at the same time, try to make it at the same place, so that that becomes a part of your day, and you're much more effective in the time. If you can only set aside an hour, you can actually get something written in an hour instead of trying to clear the desk and find the right paper and or get into the right computer program, whichever system you use. So do it every day, and it builds on itself, and then share with people, and they'll be asking for that copy.
Excellent, thank you. Let's keep moving right on. We're in part 2, mindset getting started. And this one, I have no idea what you have in mind. You have here the title, The Writer's Cabin in Your Mind. Now, I'm curious, what does that mean?
The phrase came from when I was traveling through North Dakota and Montana, and came across a museum, a community museum that had Louis L'Amour's writer's cabin in it. And if anybody knows the volume that he turned out, the number of books, is simply amazing. I don't know if he had time to do anything else, but it was so interesting to be in this little cabin with his manual typewriter and know the volume of work that he had generated. So I came up with the idea of the writer's cabin in your mind. Most of us are not going to be able to go to a cottage and be away for 30 days and write that work. So you have to create that writer's cabin in your mind so that you can go there to the place that you have the creative juices flowing so that you can write. So create that space in your mind, and the first steps to doing that are to create that physically, a place where you're going to write, where the other items are away, where you've cleared your desk and you're not looking at the calendar and saying, oh gosh, I should have paid the water bill today, or worrying about those kind of things. If the dog needs grooming, well, then groom the dog. But set the time aside, set a place aside where you're going to write, and where you have an hour to sit down, get into that space, and let the ideas flow.
Now, you've certainly talked about the mental space, getting your mindset right. Talk a little about the physical space. What about some of the tools that can help people create that physical space? Does any of that play into this, or is that not important?
The tools that are important are what is right for you. I had a client who wrote his entire book on his BlackBerry. Would I recommend that? Is that right? I wouldn't recommend it, but he got his book done, and he has a complete manuscript, so that was right for him. There's great computer programs, and people enjoy moving things around. It's much easier with a computer program. There's still a lot of people that write with a big whiteboard and yellow stickies, and that's the way I work. I use a Moleskine notebook and a good quality pen, the right tools are the tools that are right for you. Whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you get used to using, is what'll work for you. So choose something. If you're a pen and paper person, that's great. I happen to believe in, that writing on good quality paper and using a good quality pen is more comfortable for me. So that's the system that I use. Some people find what I spend on a pen an outrageous amount. Is $80 a lot of money for tools? Next time you go to your garage, uh, ask your mechanic what he spends on tools, and then you'll find that an $80 pen and a $30 moleskin notebook are incredible bargains.
Point well taken. Okay, and another really interesting topic here, continuing with part two, mindset, getting started, is, and don't bother me, I'm playing with my writer's blocks. Les, you're really going to have to explain yourself on this one.
Pretty simple. I worked as a freelance writer for several different newspapers and made a living as a freelance writer for 7 years. When you're coming up with the idea, selling the story, writing it, and all for anywhere from $100 to $150 a story, you realize that there isn't a lot of time left in the day to say, oh, there's just nothing coming to mind. It's not working today. So for me, and I try to be much more tactful in a coaching situation. But the truth is that writer's blocks do not exist. Sit down and write something, and you can improve it tomorrow. But the idea of a blank paper and saying that the feeling just isn't there, I don't buy that. And then if you walk away one day, well, then the paper has beat you. You come back the next day, and your attitude is, oh man, there was nothing there. I couldn't write yesterday. The paper won. Well, now the paper has won 2 in a row, and you won't write the next day. Sit down and write, and it's easier to improve. You'll find some copy there the next day, and you say, well, that wasn't really, Hemingway kind of stuff, but I can improve on it, and I can make it better. And that is way easier than starting at a blank page again the next day. So do not get into the habit of letting writer's blocks happen. They don't exist. Write something every single day.
What's this tool that you use in that vein of thinking called the 2-minute rule? I thought that was a little interesting, but I didn't understand what it meant.
2 minutes, give yourself 2 minutes and see what you get done. Assign 2 minutes just to get started. And if you get the beginning of a sentence, see where it'll go. You might surprise yourself. It might not end up where you were thinking it would, but give yourself 2 minutes just to see what you've got done. And you'll be amazed if you write for 2 minutes at the ideas that come to mind and where it might go.
Now, have you ever had, you're saying there's no such thing as writer's blocks, but let's be honest, Leslie, you ever had a client that's had writer's block? I'm sure you've had several. Can you give me maybe 2 or 3 examples of how you're able to help them break through that perceived obstacle and to continue with writing process?
Absolutely, and we go back even further than writer's block, where they don't know what the topic is. Well, heavens, if you don't know what the topic is, how can you have writer's block and not know what to write about it? So we start with, well, what are you writing about? And well, then we once we've decided the topic for the book, my first thing is that you make a list of the 25 topics in your book, and those are the 25 concepts that have to be included. So that becomes your table of contents, and then we work on one of those in each session. Now, certainly that brings us to the point of your question. A client will say, I don't know what to write about this. I know that it's important. It was important the day that I made the list. I don't have anything to write about. And my response is, well, I made your list. Tell me a story about it. Like what's the story that you've told your friends or for speakers that you tell on stage? Something that you're comfortable with. The story that you would tell at a cocktail party or at the water cooler at work. And we get started with that. And sure enough, they'll think of a story that relates to that incident, and they tell the story, and we go on from there. And my next question is, what's the reason? Why was that important? What's the concept here? Why do you tell that story about that? And then we go on to what's the impact? What do you want the reader to learn from that story? Why do you tell people that story? Then we go back and write the introduction that takes the reader to the beginning of that story, and lo and behold, they've got their chapter done. So it's all about asking the questions and discovering the story in their mind, because it's there.
Well, you're already starting to reveal some future secrets from future sessions here, so I can't wait to get to that part. Les, we've been talking now for an hour, and I can only imagine it's time for us to hydrate a little bit to keep the mouth going and keep the vocal cords. So if you feel free to grab a little bit of water there or some coffee you might have next to you so that we can keep you talking while I introduce the next session. Sound fair enough? So keeping the camera on myself, we're moving on now to, we finished part 1, we finished out part 2, and going on to part 3, which I imagine is a big topic for a lot of people, because even before they start writing their book, they must have in mind about, you know, how am I going to market this book? How am I going to promote this book? So let's spend some time at least addressing that question, which, I mean, I'm sure you don't have a client yet that hasn't asked you. So tell us again, you know, something more. Sorry, tell us a little bit more about marketing and promoting your book.
Well, marketing the book is important, and it's not a linear process. I mean, some people think that it's in the way that you do this thing is you write a book, then you think about designing the book, because now you've got a manuscript, and then you think about a cover, and now that we've got 2,000 books in the garage, we should start thinking about selling it. And yes, there are clients that do that, and I have to tell you, most of them end up with about 1,900 books in the garage till the day that they have that big sale. And it's not a big sale to buyers, it's a big garage sale. So I recommend thinking about marketing and promoting your book as the second thing that you do. When you have a concept, that's what your book is going to be about. The next thing is think of how you're going to market that book. Start by deciding who you're going to market to, defining that target market, that audience that you're writing for, and then develop ways to sell to them. Where can they be reached? How do you reach out to them? The way that you're going to market will determine a lot of things in terms of the production of the book. If you're reaching for an audience that is going to read on the subway or on the bus, they want a soft cover book that fits in their handbag or in their briefcase, and it can't be bigger than 9 by 6. In fact, they prefer 8.5 by 5.5. 9 by 6 is the big edge, the big size for that market, and they don't want hardcover because that's too difficult to pack. If you're targeting busy executives, maybe you want an audio book that they can listen to when they're at the gym or when they're on their drive.
So, or the Kindle version now too, right? With the explosion of tablets and smartphones.
Absolutely, people are reading books in different ways. So our first thought is the concept of the book. Then let's figure out who we're going to sell it to, and then we gotta see what system is best for them. Let's make it as convenient as possible, because there's a lot of books out there. Why are they going to choose ours? For one thing, on the convenience and the way that we deliver it. So let's start thinking about a marketing plan really early in this process. And you know,
so what's the first step in that marketing plan, Les? What's the very first thing that you should do?
define who you're writing for, and as clearly as you can. I have not, but I understand that in the head office of Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas, there is a life-size cutout of Cindy, who is their typical customer. She's 5'2", she's blonde, she's got 3 kids, she wears those sweatpants with the cuffs on the bottom, the elastic on the bottom, she drives a dented Chrysler minivan, and the dent is in the rear quarter panel. That's how Walmart defines their typical customer, or at least that's my understanding of it. If it works for the largest corporation in the world, why wouldn't we do that? Let's define who we're writing for, and that will keep our writing so much more simple, so much easier, because now we can always ask ourselves, how will this help our typical reader? And we go to it to the point that we even give them a name. I call mine Stanley, so that now when we come up with an idea, we know, how is that going to help Stanley? Or is it going to help Stanley? If it's not going to help Stanley, it shouldn't be in the book. That's how we stay on focus. So, and everybody has more material than they can possibly use in one book. So when we sit down to develop our marketing plan, we are in fact taking great strides to making the writing process easier. We're defining who we're selling to, what age group, what education, so that we know what style we're writing, and we're defining how we can reach them. So that's going to help us get a marketing plan in place, whether we want to have this as a Kindle book, whether we've got to hurry to get it out as a paperback, or whether we're writing a hardcover, leather-bound book that will be enjoyed in the library in rainy days. So let's figure out who our client is, where they buy books, how they read books, and then develop a marketing plan that allows us to fit into their system.
Now, you mentioned about the value in terms of deciding whether something actually goes into the book or not. But have there been any situations where a person perhaps didn't decide or determine that early on what the value of that book was, or define their target audience, and then they just did themselves a disservice perhaps, or just, has that ever happened to you?
My prime example of that is working with a retired First Nations chief, who we wrote his book and to have it released at his 80th birthday. And we had a great response, and the book sold well, and it did well. But it just so happened that a year later, I was having supper with him at a community event, and he leaned across the table and he said, "You know, Les, there's one thing that that I left out in my book that I'm sorry about." And I was like, oh, and I felt kind of sad, because I knew he wasn't writing a book, and I thought this was a really important issue, and I wondered. I said, well, what was it? And he said, well, you know that part about when the Queen gave me a medal? I should have included it in the book. I should have told that story. And I laughed, and we were pretty good friends, because we had worked our way through this book, and I find that I'm pretty close to most of my clients by the time we finish. And I said, do you remember how many times I asked you to include that? How many times I looked at that picture and said, can we use it? And he said, yeah, but I didn't think it was that important at the time, and now I realize that the medal from the Queen should have been in the book. So too late, can't go back. But yeah, and we'll all have regrets. You cannot include everything. There hasn't been a perfect book written. There will be mistakes, but you got to get to the point that you hit send and it goes to the printer. But sure, there's always things that we regret and things that we think of later.
Sticking on this topic about why the marketing of the book is so important, or thinking through this process before you start writing. How have you helped people, keeping the end in mind, to use a Franklin Covey a phrase? How have some of these tools, helped with that process?
Well, it tightens the process. if you spread out writing the book and then you think about design and then you think about marketing, it just takes you forever. I believe that you should be able to write a book in 30 days, publish it in 90. So what that means is if you're writing a chapter a day for those first 30 days, around chapter 18 or so, we should also be looking at the design of the book and the format that we're going to use. And here I'm speaking only of the traditional hard copy that you're going to. You should have decided, probably before you sat down to write the first chapter, in terms of the format, whether it's going to be a Kindle book, whether it's going to be a soft cover book. You should have defined those things earlier in the process. But now we decide the format and the type style and get a cover designed. By about chapter 21, 22, we're shopping for an editor so that when we finish this manuscript, we know who is going to be our editor, instead of, then starting to shop and then finding the one that we would like to use is busy at that time, and then that further delays it, and then, oh my gosh, the printer is shut down in July because of the holiday season. So starting to work on these things early just expedites the entire process and shortens the time to that book launch, which is the ultimately most exciting day you're going to have in this whole process.
Now, I'm maybe revealing too much here, but I'm really anxious to hear this story. In the notes here in this particular section, you mentioned a particular individual that has a large collection of books in her garage. Can you tell us what that story is and why that was important here in this context?
The client wanted to have a book. She wanted the recognition of having a book and having her picture on the back cover. And I gotta admit that is a big reason for writing a book, and it's pretty special when you do see those books and you're on the back cover as the author. But and the other thing is that 4,000 is a bestseller in Canada, and when I tell people that, they're kind of surprised. And I work with one of the largest printer in the country, and their average run on books is only 1,300. So keep that in mind, that a bestseller is 4,000 and the average run is 1,300. So that should help you decide what volume you wanted. But this particular lady wanted to have a bestseller, so she ordered 4,000 books, and we wrote the book in 30 days, and it's a brilliant book. We found an illustrator, and the book is targeted at young people and how to save money for university. I call it kind of a wealthy barber for kids, and it talks about putting some money away from your first job and saving money for university, or deciding if you want a wedding, and those kind of things. Brilliant, absolutely great information, but she never thought about the marketing process. So here we are 2 years later, and she has roughly 3,980 of those books in her garage. And that's sad, because it's a great book, but there's no marketing plan to get it out there. And the other thing is, and she's got a what we would call a regular job. She's not a speaker or someone that can use the books in the promotion of her business. So the books don't get out there, and you got to tell people. The idea of build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door, that's not so in books. You can write a brilliant book, but if you don't have people that know about it or tell people about it, they're not going to come to your garage and ask if they can buy a book. That just doesn't happen. In fact, the numbers for the industry are that roughly 20% of all books are given away, and Just work that in. You're not buying, yeah, you're not buying expensive advertising on radio, TV, or print. But when was the last time that you saw an ad for a book? You buy books because people told you about them. So that's the way you have to market your book. Get some copies out there. Um, and that's just the standard in the industry. About 20% of all books are given away to get them out there. The other thing, and we do see a lot of expensive ads in the pet food business, but the pet food business, I have friends that work in that industry, and they say they just count on a 10% giveaway samples. And that's what they do in pet stores or point of sale places, so that people take it home and their pets try it. Pets don't get the vote, and it's my understanding that most animals are colorblind, so they can't decide on the bag on the shelf anyway. But people take it home, try it, and if Rover liked it, you bet they're going to buy it next time. So you have to think about that in terms of how you're going to market your book. You got to get some out there, and the sooner you start thinking about it, the sooner you'll start selling some.
Well, that's a great story to round off the whole section of why marketing is, and thinking about the marketing of the book is so important before you actually start writing. Let's move now to, we're still in part 3, and the next topic in part 3, which is marketing and promoting your book, actually deals specifically on how to use your book as a speaker, author, coach, or consultant. So if you could share some of your wisdom in that, just start with general, and then you can actually move to each individual area we just mentioned, being the speakers, authors, coaches, and consultants. So take it away, Les.
Well, and we've touched on this in an earlier session, that you can use a book 3 times, regardless of whether you're a speaker, or a consultant, a coach. You can use it for lead generation to get more books. You can use it as a sale, so that it's at the event if people want to take some of you home with them. And you can use it after the event as a thank you. And those 3 things apply for all parts of the industry, whether you are a speaker, or whether you are a coach or a consultant. Think about how you could use a book as a promotional tool, and you can't quite carry them in your pocket as you do a business card, but I treat them the same way. I use books as a business card. If I meet someone, I may only have 2 books with me, but I give them one of my books, and people are amazed, and I always make a point of signing it for them before an event. I get those books out there. I always take a book to a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment, any place that I will be in a waiting room and waiting, and I go through it, and I find, yeah, it seems strange that you're sitting there reading your own book, but it's something that I take along. It allows me to use the time. Sometimes I even make notes in it, and I leave it in the dentist's office. I leave it in the doctor's office, and think about it. You only have to be more relevant than a 3-year-old Time magazine. Certainly your book should be better than that. And that's all you're competing with, is those old magazines on the table in a waiting room. For heaven's sakes, if you can't beat that, there's something wrong with your book. And it's amazing. Your contact information is in there. People start to read a chapter, and they'll come home, and today more than likely they'll give you an email and ask where they can get a copy of the book, or they'll tell you, that they saw it at the doctor's office, the dentist's office. I actually had enough calls from our requests that my dentist bought 27 books last year at Christmas. And it was an amazing feeling. Imagine going to a dentist and walking away with a check. It's I gotta say, it's a phenomenal feeling. Getting paid for going to the dentist. It was quite something. So So use that, and I mean, who knows who the next person is that comes in to see that doctor, dentist, chiropractor, or mechanic, whoever it is. Leave a book there. You don't know who will come in next, and odds are you wouldn't have reached them anyway. So for the price of a couple of dollars that your book cost, you've got the chance to reach a different market. Use it before.
So that's a very unique situation. I can certainly imagine. I'm gonna put you in a corner though right now, Les, and I'm gonna ask you just to tell me about each one specifically. So I want you to look at me and say, okay, and imagine I'm a speaker, and I want you very specifically to say to me, how can you use this book as a speaker to get instant credibility, instant authority, to get engagement? Just I'm a speaker. How do I use this book? Go.
You're a speaker and you don't have a book. How do you convert that call? What do you send people as promotional material when they ask you about speaking at an event? Do you have a brochure? Do you send them an electronic brochure? What do you send them to convince them that you are the right person? If you have a book, you can then say, I'll put a copy of my book in the mail, or if you need it immediately, I'll send you a PDF, and the hard copy will be coming in the next couple of days. You're probably working in North America, so you have overnight access, and there is nothing that will jump you to the head of the I want to hire line faster than an express package arriving the next morning with your book in it and a personal note from you saying, thanks for considering me. Here's my message. I look forward to delivering it to your audience.
Very powerful. Okay, so that's what I do before the event. Now I'm at the event. That's I got hired for the engagement, or I have other engagements that I go to as part of my calendar as a speaker. How do I use that book to market my business at the actual event itself?
The marketing at the event starts before the event. After you have negotiated the contract that they will be paying you for your role as a speaker, you then offer to sell a book for everyone at a discounted price. For one thing, this probably comes out of a different budget. The budget for speakers at the conference is one thing. The takeaways is now out of an educational budget. So they have a different amount of money. They have a different pool of money that they're going to use. You offer to provide a book for everyone that can be included in the goodie bag. You offer to sign those books for that event, and you offer to work with a sponsor that could put a business card in that book saying that it was a gift from them. So in fact, that sponsor has the look of giving a $20 book that they've only paid $10 for. And believe me, most businesses like that approach. Now, everyone has a book, and you're done speaking. At the end of your speech, the end of your presentation, the end of your workshop, you say, I'll be around throughout the day if anyone would like their book personalized. Please come by and I'll sign it. You have autographed them all, so make sure that you keep the same pen, because nothing makes you look less professional than having signed them all in a black pen, and now at the event you're using a blue pen. You're a writer, for heaven's sakes. Have a pen, have a good pen, and one that stays with you. Now when they come by, you're signing in the same ink, you're personalizing it, you're putting their name in it, asking what they enjoyed about the presentation, and if they know another audience that would benefit from hearing this lesson.
Okay, and then now that's during the event. Now again, following this line of thought, I'm a speaker. I've completed the event, or I've packed my bags. I've taken the plane home. I'm now back in my office. Now what do I do?
Now you send the person that hired you, because this is the influencer. This is the person that can choose if you will be hired again or recommend you to another department in that company. Now you send them a book with an inscription. And this is where I use the hardcover books. I have a small number of hardcover books made of each of my books that I use as a special presentation with an inscription that says, "Thank you for choosing me to speak to your audience. I am sure that you were too busy during the event to hear me speak, because I know that this was a busy deal. I hope you enjoy the message. Thank you." And I send them that hardcover book with that inscription, and I find it's amazing at how many times I'll visit them a year or two down the road and find that that book is still there. It's either on their desk or in their bookshelf. People just hold on to a hardcover signed book. And these books cost me about $25. What can you send as a thank you to your client for $25? A few flowers and a box of chocolates. You can't do it for that amount of money. So sending your book, it's just the greatest thank you ever.
We almost have to write an entire separate book on this topic about how to market and promote your book. Certainly, any parting gems you want to share with us before we move on to the next section in this next question in this topic?
I didn't write an entire book on this, but wrote a chapter on this for the NSA book about Speak More on exactly this. There is a chapter that outlines these things in the National Speakers Association book about how to use your book as a marketing tool, and these things are outlined in much more detail.
Well, in terms of making public commitments, Les, you're also working on another book, are you not, about this topic? What's that book called, and when can we expect the release of that opus?
Well, the Instant Expert book, which covers a lot of these topics, is underway, and it's getting close. It's in the final edit, and we'll talk about the importance of editors at a later session. And that's the one thing that I do not skimp on. So we're going to talk about that. About the editors at a later session, but I expect that Instant Expert will be out fairly soon. I know that we've got commitments for it at some speaking engagements, and for one thing, it's going to be a reality for the Speakers Convention in France in August. I'm keynoting there, so I know that I'll have it done by then.
Well, hopefully we can have a chance to read that before August. How's that? All
yes.
Right. Okay, so we're in part 3 still, which is the idea about marketing and promoting your book. But you have an interesting topic here that kind of intrigued me, and that was recycle, remarket 7 times your material. So, I mean, how are you able to get 7 times your original content list? Or what's the secret sauce here?
Well, the 7 seems kind of magic because we all know that that's something that we remember, and we all know about the 7 habits, and 7 is a magic number. But when I was freelancing for agricultural papers, the one day I decided, it was just a challenge. I sat down and decided that I would try to see how many newspapers I could sell the same story to. And I ended up selling the story of a soft wall, a canvas walled dairy barn in southern Manitoba. And it was the first barn of its type to be built with a material sidewall like that. I decided to see how many newspapers I could sell it to. And I sold it to 7 different farm publications. And in fact, at an event later on that year, I ran into the veterinarian that had designed that barn, and obviously he subscribed or received the majority of these publications, maybe all of them, and he came up to me and he introduced himself and said, "I'm the fellow that designed that barn, and I really think that you made more money selling that story than I did on the actual design work." I don't think he was quite right, but it did show that you could use the same material. I only went to one event, and I did write the story for 7 different newspapers. How did I do that and not get into trouble with each of the editors? By writing a different story. It all had the same, it was all about that, the furthest north that a soft wall barn had ever been built. That was the key to the story. But knowing the 7 different publications and their characteristics and writing the story in that approach allowed me to sell it to 7 different editors, and they were never offended that someone else had the same story. I wrote for one newspaper that was a very how-to kind of thing. So in fact, that was much more about how the barn was built and what could be done. I wrote for another dairy publication out of Wisconsin, which was considered the Bible of the dairy industry, and for them it was a feature story that a barn of this type had been built that far north. So for them it was a feature. For a Manitoba paper, it was just the fact that a new barn was being built and the amount of investment that a dairy farmer was putting into the industry. So by knowing the characteristics of the publication, I was able to sell that story 7 times. Lots of people think that by writing a book, they can use that material and in different ways. And that's absolutely correct. But it's not a matter of posting a chapter on your blog or making a collection of your blogs into a book. Just as I recognize the different characteristics of those publications, you have to recognize the different characteristics of the medium that you're working for. You can tell the same story, but not in the same words on your blog, in a chapter, in your book, or any other ways. I mean, you know, if you send it out on Facebook, it's a very short story, and you might include a picture. If you're writing it on your blog, you can expand it, and blogs tend to be 400 to 500 words. A chapter in your book is probably 2,000 words. So you have an opportunity to tell much more of the story, but you have to be aware of the different media. I get lots of requests from people who say they've been blogging forever and they'd like to make their blogs into a book. And if they don't want to take the time to rewrite it properly for a book, I advise them against doing it, and I will refuse to work with them because. And there might be the rare case with an exceptional writer, but when was the last time that you went to a bookstore and bought a collection of old newspaper columns? Not so often, I'm guessing. So why then would you believe that someone would want a book that was a collection of your old blogs or tweets? They might find value in the information, but they're not going to read it in that format. Be aware of the format in which you deliver it and write accordingly.
You know, it brings to bear, unless you're like a Jimmy Carter or an ex-president or a very famous athlete like a Wayne Gretzky, I can't imagine you being interested, like you say, in their Facebook and posts, status updates, and their tweets.
No, so why think that that's going to be a book? It's not about the value, the volume that we generate. It goes back to that very first thing that we talked about in terms of marketing and defining your person that's going to be your audience, giving them a name, and asking, how is this going to help Stanley? If you can't answer that question in 2 sentences straight away, then this material should not be in your book. So some old blog, some old tweet is probably not going to help Stanley or give him some tools that he can use as early as tomorrow. Don't put it in your book.
Okay, so we're now in the last section here of part 3, which is marketing and promoting your book. And I get this part is basically dedicated to you sharing some of your stories of some non-traditional ways or methods that you've either used or seen to market and promote your book. So, Les, what has been some outside the box, outside the square examples that you can share with us anecdotally?
This is when I do a boot camp, and my guarantee at the boot camp is that you'll get the outline of your book and 3 chapters done, and it's a pretty intense experience. And for breaks, we talk about fun things like how to find an editor, or what type style you should use. So that's what we do for the lighter stuff. But the section on how to make your book worth $100 is always one of the most fun and draws the most laughs. And it's fun, but it should also be economically rewarding. And you have to think of some ways to make some copies of your book worth $100. And in earlier sessions, I spoke about the idea of having some hardcover books done that you can use as thank yous for people that hire you. Now, I mean, those books are worth much more than $100, because if they lead to one additional speaking engagement, to one additional hiring, well, that's well beyond the $100 mark. But it is quite possible to have individual copies that sell for $100. My prime example on this is a couple of years ago, a fellow in Winnipeg, Manitoba, was writing a book about a retired football player. Kenny Plain wore number 11 and was the quarterback for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers through the 1960s. The fellow wanted to write a tribute to Kenny Plain, but he couldn't come up with the funds for it. So when I contacted him, I asked, well, why don't you Kenny, and the book was going to be called The Old Number 11, because Kenny Plain wore number 11. I suggested to him that he make 111 special books that would be worth $111, and that he could sell to generate about $10,000, which would be the cost of printing the commercial run of the books. He liked the idea, but he couldn't come up with a concept. And I said, well, the 11 is kind of the magic here, that we've got 111 books, we're going to sell for $111. How do we make them special? Well, they become what I call author's proofs, and so we put a little 1 over 111 or 2 over 111, so that they become like artist proofs, and they're limited edition print. And then he told me the story that Kenny Plain was the only person to win a Rose Bowl and the Grey Cup, which is the Canadian Football Championships, in the same year. He won the Rose Bowl on January 1st with his university team, turned pro that summer, and by fall won the Grey Cup with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So what we did is included a black and white picture in those special books that had a picture of Kenny Plain winning the Rose Bowl and with the Grey Cup. Put the picture inside the front cover, had them autographed, and sold them for $111 each. Will football players, or will football fans buy that book? No, not a chance. They'll spend $8 for a beer at the stadium, but they will not spend $111 for that book. Will their daughters or their girlfriends? In a heartbeat. So your marketing plan there is not to football fans. Your marketing plan, your reach, is to the friends, to the family of football fans, because they will buy that book knowing that there's only 100 of them out there, and that would be special. So you got to think of something like that, and we don't all work with famous football players, but stamps are a tremendous. People still like stamps, and do you know that the Canadian Post Office, the British Post Office, and the U.S. Post Office all will make personalized stamps if you send them a picture? So the book that I did for a retired Native chief, we actually had 3 stamps made from the British Post Office, because when the treaty was signed, it was between Britain and the U.S. Canada wasn't even a country when Treaty 1 was signed, and so we featured his likeness on stamps from Britain, the U.S., and Canada. Used 3 different likenesses, but all of him in traditional, in his traditional headdress. And that just added a tremendous amount of interest in that very limited run of books that had stamps from, and these are real working stamps. I mean, lick 'em, stick 'em. Real working stamps from England, Canada, and the U.S. And the joy is that they all cost less than $1. So for about $2.50, we increased the value of that book tenfold.
That's an amazing story. Could you even take like the covers of books and use those as stamps too?
Yep, absolutely. You any image, I mean, within reason, it has to be tasteful, but any image you can send to the Canadian Post Office, to the British Post Office, and they will send you a sheet of stamps that is legal tender and will work. So yeah, you could send out the invitations to your book launch with stamps that had your book cover on it.
That's an amazing yet really inexpensive way of promotion. I've never heard that before.
And you can do it on a postcard.
Yeah.
Imagine if you had a postcard of your book cover, and on the back. Postcards are one of the most overlooked and most affordable systems to jazzing up the value of your book. I worked with a client who was in Oman teaching oil executives, and I had her send me a postcard every week, which we included at the end of the chapter for that week. She wrote a chapter, sent me the chapter from Oman, and we put the book together. And she also sent me a postcard written in her own hand, and we included the front, you know, the picture from the postcard in color, and then we included her note, you know, of what she had found exciting, what she had done that week. So it just adds a little personal touch. Again, you know, if you buy a really expensive postcard, you're up around $1. Mail it from that place wherever you are, and you've got the name of the postmark on it. I'm just looking up and seeing I have a number of postcards. Actually, I sent myself some from a place called Hell that we visited last year, and it's even got the post office, the stamp on it, the cancellation from Hell. So haven't quite figured out where to use that in a book, but it's just kind of interesting, and I send myself postcards from a lot of places that we travel.
Yeah, you'll find a use. I'm hopefully one day when you do, be sure to share. One more thing here than the non-traditional methods of marketing or examples that you've used over the years is something. You have a book launch coming up in January 2015. What can you tell us about that and the non-traditional marketing aspect?
Well, I can tell you that it's non-traditional in that I've sold 500 copies of the book that I have committed to writing, and they're going to be using them at the Alberta Services Board convention in January of 2015. The book is about genetically modified crops and the things that we need to feed the expanding population of the world in the next couple of years. So the announcement of the book came on March 25th, the 100th anniversary of Norman Borlaug's birth, the father of the Green Revolution, and the book is dedicated to him and the next Green Revolution, and it's going to feature 25 farmers from around the world and what new genetics have done for them and how it's improved their lot in the world and allowed them to feed an expanding population, and that's at least the working title of the book is Yes, We Can Feed the World, and it features It features 3 farmers on it, one from North America, one from Europe, and one from Africa in different cornfields.
Great. Well, listen, that's a good, I think, ending point here for the part 3, which is basically how to market and promote your book. And I'm really looking forward to your Instant Expert book coming out, because, in fact, that will probably flush out a lot of these ideas and really focus on that part specifically. So everyone, just so you know, that basically comes to a conclusion, the first 3 parts of this part. We have one more part coming up, which is going to be part 4 of How to Write Your Book by Les Kletke. We're going to bring this particular broadcast to a close and open up a new broadcast on the same channel. So for those of you watching right now, the broadcast is going to be ending right now. Just go back to Les's YouTube channel page, and we can pick up part 4, which I think you're all going to be extremely interested in getting a look at, which is the writing process. Now, we know, based on some of the other webinars and we've done with other associations and groups, that this tends to be a very high level of interest in this particular area, as Les shares the very specific tools and strategies and tactics that he uses directly with his coaching clients or in his ghostwriting engagements to help them get their message to the world. So thank you very much for joining us. That ends this particular broadcast, and we're going to be back in about 2 minutes with part 4, the writing process, getting it done.